Hi, I am Jeffrey Warnick, and welcome to another PodShoot. Happy to have Ryan Christian as my guest. It's been suggested, as I do actually read almost all the comments, at least for the first couple of days after podcast has been posted on BitChute. I do go back for several days and read the comments and see if there are any comments I think I should respond to or not. And there's some people have commented that I should invite on some of the people who are active content creators on the platform. Uh, so, I thought that was a pretty good idea. And so as a consequence of that, Ryan graciously accepted my invitation to have a conversation with me today. Um, Ryan, tell me the idea behind where you got the name, The Last American Vagabond, for your podcast, for your
Oh,
profile.
absolutely, and thanks for inviting me on, Jeffrey. It's good to be here. I'm happy to see where the direction is going right now, and I'm happy to see BitChute getting some attention that it deserves. Um, Ultimately, it's a big question. It's funny. This gets asked over the years, in the sense that it's developed a lot as this has grown, but really as it started, it kind of was something that just kind of jumped into my mind. The first part of it was ultimately we were traveling. I've been an avid traveler my whole life. That's where one of the aspects of it comes from. And I was traveling with a friend of mine. I had an RV, and we were kind of just traveling around the United States in that regard before we had traveled overseas. And he randomly started like a blog around sports or something, and I just said, I want to do that. Just right out of nowhere, just randomly decided to start this little thing. Never had designs to make it kind of what it came today. It was the first year, so many years, was really focused on cannabis law reform and like that kind of manipulations around that. But that's kind of where it broadened to just so many different political manipulations. But eventually, it kind of just turned into something that I really was very passionate about. And in the travel, the name was really just pop into my mind. But as I traveled and it continued to grow, it developed for me into something kind of the idea of our pursuit for truth is never fully finished. And I think that's the idea of a vagabond. I mean, obviously it has a negative connotation and some of the definitions of the word, dirty traveler, whatever. But in most cases, it just means an endless traveler, right? You don't have a destination. You're basically just traveling. And so for me, that's the picture that I actually took that picture when I was traveling in Spain on the El Camino de Santiago. It's a pilgrimage across Spain. And I took that picture of people I was traveling with. And so the name essentially became the endless pursuit of truth, because our journey is never done in trying to, like, as we know, even if we find something that we feel is certain, if we're being objective about it, new information could come along that could evolve our understanding of it. And that's kind of what it comes back to for me.
And why did you do that walk? I mean, I've seen a documentary about the walk. I saw there was a movie made, I think, with Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
About the walk. What inspired you to do that walk?
It's funny. I like I said, I've traveled a lot. I've been in many different countries backpacking. I'm a very avid, like, minimalist backpacker kind of idea, where, like, side note, when I went to do that trip, it's actually easier at this trip because it's meant to sort of be a religious pilgrimage in a way. Well, I mean, it is, but many people today just do it for fun. But it's easier to do a minimalist in that kind of mindset. But I ultimately got I have a lot of interesting back channels for different kind of cheap flights. So with the flight and the whole travel, I ended up doing the whole thing for something like under 2,000 or 20 something hundred, like really, really cheap for a round trip flight and being able to backpack for a month. And so it's like I prided myself on being able to bring it down to basically nothing and bringing as little as possible. And so ultimately I ended up, I had been traveling around a lot in more of like for fun, just fun backpacking experience. Asked my buddy who had just done this, and same kind of thing. He's out just traveling for fun, and I asked him. I said, "Was it a great trip? Did you enjoy it?" Because I'm thinking about going to like Thailand or something. Very different kind of trip. and he was like, "No, it's amazing. I had so much fun. It was the best thing I ever done." And he wasn't necessarily lying, but I went on the trip, and easily the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. In the context of, in a lot of different ways, mentally, spiritually, physically, just I could go into so many different things that were grueling, like 20-kilometer days of travel up and down hills and mountains. We started in France and actually went over the Pyrenees Mountains at a time when it was snowing, which they didn't recommend doing. It was actually mildly dangerous. But the long story short is it was profound. I mean, deeply profound. And we can get, if you'd like, get into the meanings of the trip and so on. But I ended up coming back and I went and saw him. He already had a laugh on a smile on his face. And I said, you basically misled me. And he said, yes, but you're glad you went, aren't you? And I said, yes, because he knew it was also very difficult, but it wasn't necessarily there for fun, but it is a spiritual pilgrimage of kind of, finding yourself in this context. Yeah, well, quickly, the idea is a pilgrimage in homage of God, in the way of St. James is actually what it translates to. And you're supposed to hike from, technically, some people start all the way from Russia, which takes months. It's wild. But you normally start from around France over into Pyrenees to Spain, and then hike all the way to Finisterre, which translates to the end of the world. And from there, you essentially get like baptized in a sense. You burn your clothes. They give you white garb that you wear, and you're supposed to be kind of cleansed in a way. And it's a very powerful trip. But long story short, I guess long story long, it ultimately, through that trip, is something that really developed my passion for all of this. That's where I took that picture. And then so many years later, when it kind of came to fruition where I made the site, the trip really played a huge factor on everything about it, the image, the thought around it. And it was very powerful.
How much traveling do you do today? You still actively traveling?
It's a sore spot for me today, to be honest, because it's a mixed bag, because what I do now and the way I do it, it very much restricts that. Just because, the day-to-day work, needing to have, at least some, I prefer to have something that's set up a little bit better than just on the road with your computer. But I recently started making myself plan to travel more. I just went to Sedona for a recent trip. I'm planning to go to Mexico coming up soon to go to Derek's event, the People's Reset. But no, dramatically less than I used to. It used to be a regular, if not yearly, more than that occurrence where I would take time to go travel somewhere overseas, and very cheaply, by the way. As people usually hear that, they think, oh, you've got money to travel. No, I basically nothing, travel very cheap. But today I miss it. There's a space, a hole for me for where we used to do that. But now that I'm in a better place for, I have pets and so on. And so it was hard for me to leave them, but I'm in a situation now where that's easier. So I plan on doing a lot more traveling, hopefully in the near future, which I miss. And maybe some on the road work. I've got the RV and so on. And so maybe we can do some TLAV on the road. That might be fun.
What's this reset in Mexico that you're going to do?
So it started out being called the Greater Reset. And it was basically meant to be a challenge to the Great Reset. Like, here's a way to do it in more holistic, decentralized direction, to the point from the Great Reset is like, here's all these problems. In some cases, there are problems that we should address in the world, mostly because of things they're doing, quite frankly, and not our fault, but that ultimately they say, okay, here. And so digital ID, for example, or centralized world. And so Derek's point and the rest of the people we're working with is like, well, here, how about we go the opposite direction, right? Here's another path we could take that would solve the problem, but does not require a centralized control structure, and it's fantastic. The thing is, the Greater Reset was a little too close for people to the original name. So they changed it to the People's Reset, which I like both of them really, but it's really about finding a path to things that do not require the technological direction, the centralized direction. He wrote an article called something like, the whole thing is I own nothing and I've never been happier, or whatever the thing they keep saying. And his point is, and I can't remember how he framed it, but he wrote an article basically saying the opposite. He lives in a homestead and I forget how it goes, but the point is that there are other paths to take that could challenge that would solve the problems, but lead to a life that is not requiring government control of our lives. I hope everyone will check it out. It should be pretty profound. It'll be at the end of January in Mexico, but it'll be on all of our platforms, so you can check it out.
Where in Mexico will it be?
Off the top of my head, I have to look up the exact location. I forget, but I do know Derek has a homestead community that he's built there. Uh-huh. So it's pretty cool. So I've never seen it in person. I'm really looking forward to going there and seeing it, because I'm a big advocate for that kind of deliberate community, kind of outside the norm, outside the control centralized idea.
Oh, that sounds kind of interesting. So
yeah, it's profound. I mean, if people just check it out on his work on theconsciousresistance.com is his personal website. And then he's also a central writer for TLAV as well. So you can find his work on there.
For which is he a writer for?
So Derek Bros he owns the website. He's the founder and editor of, it's called theconsciousresistance.com.
Uh-huh.
And then the Last American Vagabond, which is my platform.
Oh, TLAV. That's what you said.
Sorry,
TLAV.
It's the acronyms.
Yes, I didn't get the acronym. I'm a little slow. So
it's okay.
All right. Oh, so you and he are good friends.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I gotta say,
how many people will be involved in this the People's Reset?
A good amount. I don't know how many he has in the background, but I know at least on the front there. I think there's at least 12 different people that are speakers and different doing different parts for the presentation. But I think he's got a huge community of people behind him that are working alongside it and just taking part. But Derek himself is a very profound and important part of the Last American Vagabond. We started a long time ago. I was a big fan of his work before I was really doing this the way I am today, and had interviewed him in the past. And as the Last American Vagabond grew into its own right, and my show, The Daily Wrap Up, I reached out to him a while back. One of the best decisions ever made, and I reached out and asked him if he wanted to write for TLAV in general. And he said yes, and it kind of just blossomed from there. And now TLAV wouldn't be what it is today without Derek. I think he's a huge and impactful part of it. And he really blossomed my understanding of a lot of different things like agorism and, really the idea of the difference between what we fight for, like even what I agree with in the context of like what the world should be like if we're forced to live in a place where there is a centralized state. So that's why I believe in, let's say, the Constitution and how that applies, but understanding more that I'm more so I believe more so in agorism and the idea of like anarchism and the idea of a world without a state. And it's a whole conversation. And I'm more and more understanding and able to actually, break that down in a way that's easily understandable. But I'm still developing that myself. But he is a really central part in that community. And it's powerful to understand that there is a possibility for a world without government. It's something that most people can't even wrap their mind around. But something I recommend people take time to look into.
I think it's unfortunate that more people can't wrap their minds around the fact is that maybe if we take a look at how the world is organizing itself through governments, that it's not doing a very good job and that we need to do something very different. Unfortunately, I think most people think the difference is not a systemic difference. It's just changing who's in charge of the system. So it's, as the way I describe it is nobody's trying to really drain the swamp. They just want property rights over the swamp.
Yes, exactly.
And so I think all these people say I want to, because if somebody wants to drain the swamp, there's a very simple way of doing that. There's only drain the swamp, means you eliminate it. Okay. So nobody's proposing to eliminate any swamp. Okay.
Right.
We had a president getting up and said, and again, I don't mean this to be partisan against Trump, but Trump talks more about draining the swamp than other people do. So, other people, I don't think Biden ran on draining the swamp. Biden ran on the fact that the swamp doesn't even exist. So you don't expect him to drain something that he doesn't even exist. But I don't think he's naming Kash Patel to terminate the FBI, but to manage the FBI the way he thinks the FBI should be managed.
Exactly.
So, so I don't think whoever he's hiring for, DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, all those people, I don't think they're there to shut down those agencies. They're there to run the agencies according to the way they think the agency should be run. So there's no desire to drain anything. They're just excess. The fight is over property rights over the swamp and who gets to use the swamp for their purposes. And I don't understand how people can be so naive or stupid to actually believe any of this stuff, because I don't see what evidence they have that would cause them to believe it. The evidence would be, it's the same thing like I think with this, with the Musk and Ramaswamy and the doggy commission that they have. I mean, first, the concept of having somebody outside the government, the thing of hiring third parties unelected, having them have no accountability, having them have no rules with respect to lack of conflict of interest or anything like that, and basically saying, I believe in the Constitution and I have so much faith in the Constitution that I'm going to turn over the management of government to people who were never elected, who have no accountability to the people, who occasionally will put tweets out there, and they're getting this commission together of buddies that they're hiring. Is there any transparency to the process of people they're bringing on board? Of course, there is no transparency to the process bringing on the board. Is there any transparency to the communication that they're having? And they talked about having a transparent process. Where is the transparent process? Where is there them saying, here's our website so everybody can put up their ideas and we'll engage in a public way with all the ideas? So they're throwing out ideas. So they putting, even like the SEC, when they come up with rules, they publish the rules on a website and they put them out for public comment. Okay, I have not seen the doggy commission, do that yet. Maybe they will do. Maybe they will pull out for content, but I've not seen much of the transparency yet.
Right.
And so, I mean,
And I get.
I made my own. I haven't published it yet, but I made my own joke about it. I mean, kind of a joke and kind of not a joke. I'm trying to find it to see what I can read what I wrote. I can read you what I wrote.
Well, while you grab that really quickly, I just want to point out that I understand why people are driven to want to believe in this, and I'll even say maybe these people could improve from where we are. But the point that we're both making here is that it's become this ongoing, never-ending cycle of lesser of evil in everything that we do, and that is a recipe to never ever. I mean, I would argue ever incline or get better. It's like a recipe to get worse. And so it's frustrating that it's because of engineered circumstance where people are desperate and they want someone to save them from the system instead of looking to themselves to save them from this problem, But I get it, but I agree with you completely. I think the problem is that they're not being transparent and they're just saying we will. And that's enough for some people because of how bad it's been. I get it's a smart plan to a degree, but I'm hoping more people can see through it. So I'm with you.
While I'm trying to find what it is that I was planning on announcing, that I was told I should put a website up first before actually announcing it. As I'm looking for that text, what do you want to accomplish with your podcast?
I mean, the general point has always been to inform people about things that I think are being deceived, or they're being deceived about, or people that they're lies.
What are the most important things that you think people are being deceived about now?
Well, it really began for me, as I said, around the cannabis law reform element, and it was a kind of a broader conversation around how this concept was being lied about, how there was profound health benefits that were being hidden, whether or not it was about smoking or just the whole plant itself and like blending it up and drinking it, but then that really quickly ballooned into understanding how many inner working parts that were not even about that. It was like, it got into foreign policy. It got into, as medicines and big pharma. And so it just blew up in my mind this gigantic thing. And that's where the site evolved into something that was more about just how we were being deceived. And I think today it's very much, I found myself, it's impossible not to follow back to like the political spectrum and see how that is a central manipulation, like the two-party illusion of it all and the partisan kind of team sport politics that we're obsessed with right now that stopped it from ever changing, because if we recognize that it's a government that's dealing with this, whether there's divisions, there's disagreements, that's always going to be the case, but just the U.S. government that's ultimately executing agendas. Then we have the people who are supposed to be engaging. We're told we influence it. I don't think that's the case anymore. The point is that if we're only ever highlighting half of that problem or part of that problem, no matter how much we highlight it, no matter how well we break it down, it will never change because it's only half the problem. It's this very well executed design that keeps us never focusing on the real culprit, which is the government. Instead, we look at ourselves and we look inward and we point at our neighbors. And yet now we've got this we say the legacy media. Well, and mainstream alternative media is part of that, but we've got this like legacy partisan element that never goes away, that's never really invested in the truth or the outcome. It's about benefiting from the process, keeping the status quo, and we just never get past this cycle. I think more than ever right now, we're seeing that, or rather, I would say feeling that. A lot of people I don't think can articulate or point to that that's what we're talking about, but we're all feeling this weird point where there's so much evidence, we all see it, we even COVID-19, and yet it doesn't seem to change. And that's what I'm always trying to highlight is we got to get beyond this partisan manipulation. So I think that's, at least in this moment, what I'm really focusing on. But generally, it's been kind of foreign policy and just government malfeasance for quite a long time, both in the medical field and foreign policy, I would say more specifically. But I talk about a lot of different things.
In my opinion, all government spending is malfeasance. Okay? Yes. Every single dollar is malfeasance. So, and I think anybody who doesn't think that's the case, that they think that if their person runs, that's not malfeasance, it's just what the other party does. I think that's part of the problem.
Yes,
that's a significant part of the problem. So I found the text of this movement that I was going to create that I still might do. So I'll read it because it's brief. Until the beginning of the progressive era, when the Fed was created and when the income tax became enshrined in the Constitution without the requirement of the proceeds be proportioned to the states based upon population, with the passage of the 16th Amendment, the federal government was spending about 3% of GDP, not the current rate of approximately 22% of GDP. So I announced the formation of a commission to make America a constitutional republic again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's face it, America was great when the government was small and limited, money was sound, and Americans were more concerned about liberty and freedom than empire. MACRA, that says Make America a Constitutional Republic again, is asking for volunteers for those who truly want to save the republic by not only wanting government to be more efficient, but for a government to be limited as envisioned by the founders, truly our greatest generation. Yes, we can not only balance the budget, but cut taxes and substantially, and yet still generate surpluses, which can be used to pay down the $36 trillion of accumulated fiscal deficits, and instead of leaving future generations to be indentured slaves and servants of the government, but people free of debt and free to keep just about all their income. Think about that, how that would truly make America great. MAGA might make America greater, but MACRA will make America the greatest ever. So that was
Nice.
that's my pitch, to have people say that really, if we think about, you know, the how great the country came from, you know, the time of the revolution to one of the wealthiest nations in the world in the beginning of the 20th century. That generation did it without any government assistance. They did it without, the government was pretty small and basically insignificant. People were not going to Washington to say, I want these perks and I want these privileges and I want these tax breaks and I want this preferential treatment. So, that didn't exist because the federal government was basically pretty irrelevant. So it spent, 3% of GDP. There were very few regulatory bodies that existed at that point in time. Many things that we could do, we didn't need to ask permission to do. There were not so many professions that you needed licensing requirements for.
Mm-hmm.
So we were this free country, a very prosperous country. We became one of the most prosperous countries on the planet, and the government had, little to no role in this process. Maybe the thing that the government contributed more to than anything was the railway system. But mostly great things occurred because people came. People came for, not because they got any handouts, not because they were getting any benefits from anyone. People came here to a country that had very individualistic values, and they knew that their success depended upon and exclusively upon their own work ethics. And they created great companies. They took great risks. They made great sacrifices, and they got great rewards for those that did a good job at making those sacrifices and being smart and intelligent and wise about, the choices they made. And they built this country, and government had very, very limited role in it, because most of what they could do, they didn't need to ask permission to do. They just were able to do it. And but of course, property rights have always been, reasonably well respected, in the country. So if we only spent, right now our tax revenues are around, 17, 18%, maybe 16.5% of GDP. So if we imagine if we spent 3% of GDP like we used to, and we tax 10% of GDP. Think about how much of a surplus we could run for years, where we not only would not balance the budget, we would be paying down our debt, and we would not burden our future generations, because we decided that we liked excessive spending, and that we didn't really want to pay for the excessive spending. We wanted other people to pay for our excessive, spending. And so, so I think it's kind of a joke that there's no proposal yet that they've talked about that's going to come close to removing $2 trillion annually from the federal budget. Most of the things that have been in the public domain at this point in time are trivial items. daylight savings time,
Yeah.
getting rid of a couple of administrative bodies. Actually, some of the administrative bodies that they're looking to get rid of actually take in more revenues through fines and penalties, and enforcement actions than the agency costs itself. So some of the things they talk about, actually, these agencies run a profit. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't necessarily deregulate, because we should get rid of all regulations. So, but there's no discussion about getting rid of all regulations. So there's no discussion about ending all subsidies. So, so there's still an incentive for people to lobby for perks and privileges. So, to me, our system design is flawed as long as people actually, when you have people sitting back and showing up at Mar-a-Lago, wherever it would be, in case Mar-a-Lago, or previously was hanging out at the Trump Hotel, I don't think they're going to be traveling out there. I don't think they'll be hanging out there now unless Trump is hanging out there now. So, and who knows if he will, because he doesn't own it and he will get no financial benefit. All the current owners, I guess it's the Waldorf Astoria there, will get the benefit. And I don't know whether he'll want to benefit them by making it his hangout while he's in DC, but maybe he will. People are paying to play, and people are paying to play because there's a return for paying to play. Like Tesla stock is up almost 100% since November. Do you know what the Nasdaq is up since November 4th or so?
And now I honestly don't pay that much attention to the manipulated markets, but
Nasdaq is up about 10-15%. The other stocks that were considered, there used to be the MAGA F index, which was Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook, now Meta. They're each up somewhere between 5 to 14-15% since November 4th. So the broader indexes like the S&P 500 and the Dow, they're up somewhere between 3 to 6%. So none of those are up any more than 15% during this period of time. Tesla's up almost 90%. So how much of that is related to that there's been news out there regarding Tesla that has caused people to reevaluate the process, or the expectation that the proximity of the relationship, is going to be very beneficial? And for Musk, not just with Tesla, it could be for SpaceX and all, and Twitter and everything else he owns. So Tesla is just one area where where you can directly measure, to some extent, the valuation associated with, what seems to be the market saying, there are a lot of benefits from the cronyism. That's what the market is saying.
Right.
The collective wisdom of the marketplace is saying, gee, the proximity he's gotten to Trump is going to make him a lot of money. So
he's the richest person in the world now, right? And that was largely after the association. Like, I think a huge portion of that.
Well, I think I read that his net worth is up over $200 billion in the last. So so there's been a benefit associated with this affiliation. The market expects there will be crony benefits associated with this affiliation, and people and I know statements have been made that they're not worried about a conflict of interest because Musk will put the country before his own personal interest. Well, there's, you don't see any evidence of that, to the extent that Musk is saying, that he supports no longer these tax credits. Well, actually, these tax credits are bad for him, not good for him, because like the tax credits helped him scale his business, the tax credits will help his competitors scale their business. So getting rid of the tax benefits, he's already got a scaled, profitable business. So now removing the tax credits will make it harder for newcomers to scale and to compete. So,
right.
So he might sound generous in saying, I don't care about these tax credits anymore. No, not having the tax credits, he's already benefited from them. They already got him to scale, and now they become a barrier to entry for somebody that wants to contest Tesla, that they won't have the same benefits Tesla had when Tesla was going through the process, of reaching a scale that they could start making profits at.
And,
So
and I,
this is
would-
not an act of generosity. This is not an act of, putting the country first. This is an act of the fact is eliminating those credits is beneficial for his business interests.
right. And I would add too that I think it's always a red flag when the point is, look at it, he's altruistic. Like historically, it's a subjective point. And I think it's frustrating that we're in a political sphere where the argument is, well, it's because it's Elon. Well, this is one of the things a lot of us are pointing out. Like, maybe, I hope you're right, but the reality is it's all narrative. It's like saying, we plan to save the world because we believe in America. And every politician we've ever pointed to has said things like that. It's just this hero worship that is a very big problem, because as you just highlighted, all of the action on the table and the benefits we've seen, this is insider trade. This is the opposite of what they're putting forward in everything, even the people they pick for their cabinet. And yet all they point to is, well, Elon said he would do right by us. That's a very kindergarten level mindset, in my opinion. I think it's dangerous.
Yes, I think it's kindergarten dangerous. I agree with you. We should not put our faith in heroes. We each got to make ourselves our own heroes of our own life.
Right.
So and I think it's, for me, maybe people don't like us saying it, I think it's pretty pathetic that people think they need somebody else to be a hero in their life.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty much, if I'm interviewing somebody who tells me that, that they think so little of themselves, that they think that the future of their life, their success, their well-being depends upon a third party, I would never hire somebody like that. I would find them pretty pathetic. So I think, when I ask people, about, and again, I'm not a Biden supporter, I'm not a Trump supporter, I don't like any of them. I wouldn't vote for anyone. I wouldn't vote for anyone who ran for office. And if I did vote, which I don't vote, I would always vote against the incumbent. I don't care what the name of the person who was running against the incumbent, because I just would want whoever was in power, I'd want them to know they only have one term, to accomplish whatever they think they're going to accomplish, rather than be part of a permanent government. So, but I wouldn't vote anyway. But if so it's likely that I even do that is minimal. But it's what I've suggested other people to do who feel compelled to vote, is they should just vote all the bums out every time if they feel compelled to vote, and see what that happens. But for people, for most people that I asked, like during the during the Biden years, I asked many people, yes, I understand that right now for the last couple of years, you've been paying, higher grocery bills, and, so that you're not happy about the inflation. And then when I asked them, I said, well, do you know this inflation is a global phenomenon? So he said, explain to me what you think Biden has uniquely done to cause the increase in grocery prices. Tell me what you think is really Biden's fault. So I want to understand what the transmission mechanism is of what act that you think Biden. I said, we shut down the entire economy, for a year. Then we also engaged in trade wars. We had tariffs and things like that, and we also had a Fed that was printing money at an unprecedented pace. That Fed's an independent body, and the people at the Fed, who was an independent body, who were printing all that money, were people appointed by Donald Trump. So can you explain to me, what do you think Biden did to you to cause that higher inflation rate, and that why you're paying more at the grocery store now? Explain to me what you think he specifically did. And people would say Bidenflation, and I guess it's a clever term, Bidenflation. It's a clever term, but nobody could ever explain to me, how that was uniquely caused by Biden. Then I sit back and tell them, I said, do you understand that also that the U.S. inflation rate during the Trump administration was basically the same as most of our trading partners. So our inflation rate has not been very different than our trading partners during the Trump administration, during the Biden administration. So our percentage of GDP as opposed to global GDP has not been materially different under both administrations. So explain to me, what do you think were their unique contributions, okay? And how would you give me the metric to prove to me, as somebody, I'm an open-minded person, let's say I came from, another planet, I landed on a planet, explain to me what you think they did that you think made one person perform better relative to the other. And I view their competitive framework is how they do compared to other nations. So if they're outperforming other nations, show me the metric that we're doing better than everybody else, or how much of it is just the circumstances at that point in time, and those circumstances have very little to do with them. So how do you know what is their direct contribution, and how much of them are just, circumstances that existed that might be better for one person and not so good? Biden had to live with the consequences of being the president that inherited the post-COVID era and getting supply chains up. Do you think supply chains get back up by snapping a finger? And didn't we artificially impair supply chains from getting back up because we also were penalizing countries that were an important part of our supply chain, and we were not accepting them to be part of the solution? So don't you think there was a cost associated with that decision? So what were the trade-offs from the decisions that we made, and how many of those decisions were really made by Biden? So, people can't answer these questions,
Right.
but they'll mouth the terms, they'll mouth the terms either negative towards Trump or negative to Biden, or positive towards one and positive towards the other, but the reality is that they can't cite any evidence. They can't cite any study. They can't give any sort of comprehensive answer. They believe it because they choose to believe it. And, why they choose to believe it, I don't want to explore people's psychological makeup on why they feel the need to believe the things they need to feel. What I do know is very little of it is done through real, rational, profound, due diligence and thought and consideration. And like you would see a CSI investigation. I used to be a big fan of Grissom and CSI, and where you just basically let the data do all the talking. You just go where the evidence takes you. So, which I guess is what you talk about.
Right. Well, I mean, it's important to ultimately. We're in a field right now where people are led a lot by the propaganda, and I think it's always been the case, right? Propaganda's always played a very powerful role in media, in government action. But I think today, like we just mentioned, it's a lot of this hero worship and the team sport politics of it all. And so when you're pointing at that, and they're absolutely 100% convinced that it's Biden's fault. And then you actually ask them, okay, well, walk me through how. It's just, well, Biden, like you said, Bidenflation, or because of what they said on the TV, because of what that politics, because of what Tucker said that one time. And these are all things you should consider. But as you're highlighting, they're not substantive. It's subjective. It's all narrative. And we're seeing this with everything, like right now with the drone conversation. Whoops, dropped my pen. Right now with the drone conversation or anything else, there's always elements of truth to them, but it's completely encapsulated with a bunch of hyperbolic partisan nonsense. And it's, why you think that may be the case, I think it differs from time to time. But like with this example, I think the picture you were highlighting well, which I agree with, is that it's all of it. Right, it's your government. It's either side of it, like with COVID-19, as you highlighted, that Trump, Operation Warp Speed, the Defense Production Act, all these different these foundational elements, the CARES Act, which led to some of the most catastrophic things we've ever seen in this country that Biden very much made worse and carried on. But you can't have one without the other. But everyone likes to pick and choose. And so I think it's a really important point for us to think about, is that it's, like I just said, as long as we only want to focus at one side or the other, it's a guaranteed, well-executed plan to make sure we never actually solve that problem. And I think that's in the interest of only one element, and that's the government.
Yeah. I think, how do you feel about, for me, and, in my opinion, being neutral is, I don't see many people who have neutral, who have, and my objective for my BitChute is not necessarily to scale, because I don't want to be an influencer. I don't make money off of doing any of this stuff, so, but, I enjoy the conversations with the people I have conversations with, but I want the ideas discussed by myself and other people, I want them to scale. Now, it seems to me the greatest impediment to having those ideas scale is that the people who have the biggest social media followings are all part of a specific tribe. So the only content that they will promote is content that advances the interest of those tribes. So if you're an individual, you're not a member of a tribe, and you're promoting individualistic type of messages, promoting decentralization, promoting some form of anarchism or some form of libertarianism, where you either have an absence of government or a government that's significantly materially smaller than the one, and one who just says, I'm going to cut two trillion out a year and still call myself a libertarian. A libertarian would laugh at the fact is you'd still have a government spending, a lot of money. So, so that still would not be much of a libertarian state. So, because it's still a far cry from historically about the 3% of spending of GDP that the government had did pretty much from its founding to the creation of the Fed. That was about what government spent, was 3% of GDP. And since the Fed, we've been on a very different fiscal path. And since the untethering dollar from gold, we got on even a worse fiscal path. And nobody's coming close to getting us back to that fiscal path. Nobody's remotely talking about that. People are saying Social Security is untouchable, Medicare is untouchable, because people want it. So people actually want a big government because they want a lot of free stuff that they don't think is free stuff, but they've been brainwashed into thinking it's for free. When it hasn't been for free, it just might be somebody else is paying for it, and they don't mind being a thief, getting benefits by taking money out of somebody else's pocket, claiming that the government is giving them the money, when the government is just an agent on their behalf of taking the money out of somebody else's pocket and transferring it into their pocket. And, James Madison said that's not the role of government, yet it's become the main role of government, is beating people over the head, robbing them of their money, and transferring it to somebody else who has political power. That's most of what government does is transfer payments.
Right.
So and the interest expense we have because of all the transfer payments we've made, that we've not been able to fund adequately. So now I think the largest budget item is actually interest payments. We'll see how Elon and Vivek determine how they're going to lower interest payments. That'll be interesting to see. So
really quickly, just what a classic example of, and it's certainly possible that you could argue the problem was manufactured itself to cause this opening for a solution. But what a classic example of the government using its own problem to then, be able to provide the solution that gives them more power over the situation. Like, it's just a classic government dynamic to take advantage of something they created that benefits themselves, And I honestly don't think it's going to in any way make it more efficient in the way that we might want it to be. I think it's going to be the obvious low-hanging fruit, which is I think it's a problem reaction solution. It's going to be artificial intelligence, more digital infrastructure, digital IDs, CBDCs. I think that's obviously where this goes.
Yeah, it's going to be things that will benefit their, Silicon Valley friends, who now will use the technology they develop in partnership with the government to, control us, and they're convinced that they're going to lead us to, it's curious that the people who have claimed to be sort of like anti-utopians, are now promoting this kind of utopian world where they provide government all these surveillance tools, and all these surveillance tools are used to make sure we behave well, and how virtuous a world we live in, because we will have privacy eradicated, except for the messaging they do amongst themselves.
Right, of
that
course.
privacy will be preserved. But outside of that, we'll be stripped of our privacy. While they're gathering, all this information, and in an area where scale is really important. So, the area of AI, the one who has, the best data scientists will go to the people that have accumulated the most data. So it's not going to be an area where there's going to be there's going to be decentralized AI. I know a while ago there was this guy who did this crypto project, a very, very smart guy. I forget his name. He did a crypto project, I think, called Singularity Net, something like that. Really interesting. He was looking to build a decentralized AI model and eventually an AGI model. I had several meetings with him. Because I found him very interesting, but I kept challenging him on what his business model was, and ultimately, to make money to sustain the project, the business model morphed at that point in time into a consulting model to generate revenues, which was centralized in nature. So so I don't know what the project looks like today. So maybe it is decentralized. So I don't want to make. I mean, I don't want to make any statements, because when I met with him was like 5 years ago.
It's
So
just
maybe
it's
longer
just
than
too
that.
bad that this is the way the market works today, that ultimately we can't have, like let's it sounded like he had a project that he was genuinely interested in because he thought it would do something beneficial. But of course, because I mean, I get the logic. I mean, you have to, a profit motive is important in the context of how the business world works, but it's just too bad that we don't have enough people willing to lean into those kind of projects that might be beneficial. And I'm not saying we know that's the case. I don't know anything about it, but it's like, it's same thing with like the music and art industry today. It's all what's marketable as opposed to just what is the best form of it. It's just, it's everywhere. It's too bad.
Well, I think I generally try and avoid. I'm not always successful at avoiding self-serving statements, but I think BitChute accomplishes that. In the
Exactly.
sense that BitChute could make choices that would make BitChute a more profitable business, and BitChute decides not to make those choices
Right.
because we want to make money, but we're not willing to sacrifice our principles to make money. So
One of
we'll
the
make as
primary
much
reasons I
money,
support
we'll
this
make as
platform,
much
Jeffrey.
money as we can with our principles intact. We're not going to trade out our principles to put more money, in our pocket. And I think that and I think that we would have never come out with a statement saying I'm a free speech absolutist, but that we have freedom of speech but not freedom of reach. I think that's an incredibly stupid thing to say.
I agree.
I don't think they're incongruent comments.
Yes.
They're comments that are in contradiction and in war with each other. But it did that to appeal to advertisers. Then they hired a CEO, who's busy trying to figure out how they could moderate content to make it appealing to advertisers.
Right.
BitChute will not do that. BitChute's not
Exactly.
going to go. An advertiser comes and says, "Gee, if you get rid of a few people here, maybe you got a few many Nazis on the platform. We see too much anti-Semitism and stuff like that. Why don't you just figure out some ways of hiding it, and we'll give you more ad dollars?" And basically, they all get the same answer, which is, pardon the expression, but it's how I feel. Fuck you. Okay.
Mhm.
So apparently BitChute might be the only platform that will just say, fuck you. And Musk said it, but he clearly didn't mean it, because
Exactly.
he's suing people, for not advertising on his platform. We're not suing people who don't want to advertise. If people
Right.
don't want to affiliate, they don't want to affiliate. I find it, for people who say, free speech is an inalienable right, and then say I don't want to be affiliated with a platform that doesn't do content moderation. One is, I would assume that a lot of really bad comments are seen by more people on X than they are on BitChute.
Mhm.
So you could say that if you're worried about content spreading that might be perceived as dangerous and you want to stop it, there's probably more content being seen on X than being seen on BitChute. So X should be seen as, quote, a bigger threat, than BitChute. So I kind of find it, ironic. When you go see the BitChute Wikipedia page, they make references to certain people who are on BitChute and how disgusting BitChute is. And some of those same people also have YouTube channels and
Right.
they're on others, but they don't say on those Wikipedia pages that these people are on there, and they might even have more followers on those platforms.
Right.
Yeah. So their
It's
attempt is to destroy BitChute. They haven't succeeded so far, and I don't think they had. I expect that they will not succeed. But
yes.
we are sincere. We're not going to get bought, and we know our model will produce a lower valuation than somebody that chooses an alternative model, and we're okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important because, it's obvious to see that these platforms are not genuine in their intent, right? And this is one of the primary reasons I do support BitChute, is because, as you said, you actively take you take action that stands with your principles, that have a clear detriment to you financially. And I think that's kind of what we're just saying about the larger picture. Is it's really nice to see that does exist. And it's really important in this conversation because there's plenty. I mean, your point you made there has been shown so many different times over, but even before BitChute was the focal point, there was platforms in the past like that, where they would hype the fact that the shooter, for example, had a platform on this video platform, and then so they had accounts on every other platform too. It's like, it's because these groups don't care about the things they claim to care about. It's about trying to shut down a platform that actually does allow a free flow of information, right? Using the guys that they're fighting about against the bad things, but clearly they don't care about them over here. And on Twitter right now, for example, you can see some really grotesque content that's completely allowed to be there. And then people that just simply say things that in contrary to what that might be, that get censored. It's just, it's a very, very dishonest situation right now. But I tend to think that in Twitter in particular, it's much more about kind of social engineering right now. There's very clear, just blunt censorship, as much as they want to pretend otherwise. But it's also a lot of very weird kind of manipulation, algorithmic and otherwise. And I just, same thing. I just don't see that happening on BitChute. So it's one of the reasons I support it. One of the many.
Thank you so much. There is an audience comment. So it's Elon Musk said X will be the everything app. That's the perfect tool to keep the plebes in line. What do you think about Elon Musk and X being the everything app?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's on video saying in a meeting with his team that he wants to, copy WeChat, which is just the same thing. So they can do everything on that. They can, pay their bills and everything. Now, I have not seen any other example of him saying that elsewhere. He probably has, but I want to stress that that's in a conversation. I do think that's what's happening, but I don't think it's, some people turn that into, he said he's going to do that, which it's fair. My point is just that I don't think that it could deviate based on other things, but he's very clear that he wants to make this that kind of central place. Let's not forget he started the X Corp before this. He's now turned this into X in the same way. And there's a thread that ties all this stuff together. And so this is all becoming, the kind of, even with the PayPal mafia kind of background overlap, it's all the same kind of technological direction. And now Twitter is becoming that exact situation. We've already seen them talk about Twitter emails and Twitter payments and like where they want all these other things to become obsolete. And from a business perspective, it's obvious to see why individuals would say, yes, that's going to make this more valuable. But the point that I'm sure the commenter brought it up for is because when you see this in the way the world is going, we should be screaming that we don't want a more centralized choke point for all of these kind of things, especially as this guy is, it's funny how they like to pretend that even Trump is not a politician, but clearly he was before this, in my opinion, but he's been the president. So you can't say that anymore. Elon Musk is about to be I mean, he already is obviously a politician and in a high level of power, whether appointed or not. And so now this changes everything, where you now have the government essentially running and funding a technocrat tied platform that wants to centralize everything you do. And guess what? There's only one way that's going to be accomplished. And they're already trying to roll it out through their Authentics biometric authentication, which is an Israeli Unit 8200 connected group to verify your ID. So you need digital IDs, you're going to need social credit kind of elements, CBDC acts, all these things intertwine with what's happening. And people that don't want to see that will push back on these things. But if you take a second to look into this, every single element of that is immediately tied to Elon Musk and then most other people around him in this field, especially like the other parts of the administration, Peter Thiel, and even Vance through that, or Vivek. They're all intertwined, and even more so in like the biological side of it with the mRNA. And, I can go off on a whole bunch of tangents, but all of that does make me very concerned how it's being centralized through this app, which I can prove is doing a lot of dishonest social engineering. And I want to reiterate, in case that was missed, of quickly saying that Authentics is an alarming Israeli intelligence intertwined element that is currently, even though they're trying to hide it, I've shown it many times right to this day, asking for biometric data from people who try to verify things on Twitter. And that's not what they need on that platform. And so I just think it's very alarming how all that comes together, but I'll leave it there.
Yes, I think I think the person who I think has been most effective at trying to warn us, and they haven't been successful either, is, it's Snowden. I mean, the personal risk he took, to warn us of the level and depth of surveillance, and the danger and how evil the surveillance is a point that I've made a number of times, is how ironic, I'll believe that the government trying to do something reasonably good if instead of having Snowden forced to live in Russia, that if I was president, which I never would want to be, I would nominate him for a Congressional Medal of Honor, bring him back to the U.S. Then I would ask him, tell me all the people who were responsible for implementing this program. And those are the people that have the Justice Department pursue, because I'd want to see what evidence that they had that they really believed what they were doing was legal. So the courts ruled that the program that he revealed, the courts subsequently ruled as being an illegal program. So I would be curious to go back, and I'm sure the government won't do this, is the government's not going to go back and say, let me take a look at all the examples of illegal, of illegal surveillance activities, and find out whether they were done on good faith or bad faith. Find out whether these people got legal opinions and whether they got reasonable legal opinions that said, this is okay. I would go back and I'd make a commitment to not buy anybody's data, because government is buying data. So I would not use, why do we want the government to spend our money buying data on information about ourselves that they don't want to ask for us directly? The government knows I can't go and I can't ask Ryan and Jeffrey for this information, but what I can do is I can basically, to do business with banks and other entities, I can create laws that say, if you're going to do business with these parties, you need to collect this information. And then when you, as a private enterprise, you're collecting this information because the government is requiring you to collect that information. Then, as far as your KYC or whatever bullshit they come up with, and then the government, goes to that third party that they've instructed to collect all this information. Say, by the way, share it with me, and I'll give you a few bucks for being a good partner with me and getting information I'd love to have on people, but I can't go through the process of getting a warrant or a subpoena to get that information because I don't have a basis for doing it, but I want to have it. But of course, I'm doing it for benign reasons. I have no bad reasons. I have benign reasons for doing it. Well, if the government had benign reasons for doing it, they could explain it to us. And I'm sure people were convinced that it was in their best interest to give the government that data, because they'd be wonderful things happen to them if they gave that data. Then people would be happy to contribute that data if the government made a compelling case saying, give me all this information, and this is how I'm going to make your life better with all the information.
Well, Jeffrey, that would be freedom, and see, that's not the case, right?
So but this is the world that Silicon Valley wants to see. They want to see the enabling of getting. What were they doing? They were scraping platforms for data. So they were scraping things that they shouldn't have been scraping, that they know are not their property rights, but they know they're big and they can get away with it. The smaller platforms don't have the money to be tied up in courts, for a long period of time. So they got to accept being victims, because at the end of the day, fighting these litigations are very expensive. And, unless you get a famous person saying, I'm going to support you through a GoFundMe page, you'll be funding yourself, and then you got to go look for investors who say, I don't want to fund a small platform that has, this litigation risk outstanding. Right. So you just end up, deciding that you're going to be, a prey, to predators, and you have people who can get away with being, engaging in predatory behavior. And so it seems to me that, this is the world that, that there's a much higher return to scale now, which means that we're likely to get a significantly more centralization. And the consequence of that centralization will be a significant loss of freedom and liberty, and we'll be more controlled. And we're going to be told that this greater control will lead to benefits in our life, that we'll leave safer, happier. There'll be no more crime. Everybody will be nice to each other. It'll be like Christmas every day. So that's the kind of utopian world, a world where they're our masters and we're slaves. What have you tried to do to get your content, seen by more people? How much? I don't know in this world of podcasters, how many people who have similar ideologies, sort of like kindred spirits, how much people are helping each other share their content, sharing their audience, because they want to basically, they want the message to be more important, than themselves. And to the extent that everybody helps each other see, have promote them with the content, that they might be more successful at seeing the world that they'd like to see?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways I think in the decade long time I've been doing this that we've tried to overlap with different platforms and try to work. But what's interesting is that in this field, there has been a lot, and I get why there's a lot of historically there's been a lot of manipulation in this field, or even just media in general, infiltrators, people like I think right now the mainstream alternative media is an example of that. And so that what I'm saying that for is that it causes people in this field to be very quick to just more skeptical. And I think it's healthy, quite honestly, because there's a lot of it going on, but then that causes a lack of coordination in a lot of ways because we're rightly concerned that there are people trying to infiltrate, manipulate. And so that's to say that it's restricted it. But I think over the years, I've really tried to bridge those gaps and trying to work with other platforms. And today we started something called the Independent Media Alliance. Now that's Whitney Webb, Derek Bros, and myself decided to start this group that was kind of a decentral. I mean, it's decentralized in the sense of how we're putting it together, but in the sense that there's no monetary aspect to it. It's just kind of a collection of people, exactly like you're talking about, that are in the independent media that we felt were in the same mindset where we're, kind of erring on the side of objectivity, nonpartisan work, and around a few main topics. I think it was COVID-19, Israel, and like the two-party illusion. And we right now, I think it's about 16 people, give or take, with a few kind of on the peripheral that are not officially part of it, but still kind of work with us. And that's the main intention, to share work, to kind of bring up the community, but also try to find others that I think are, there's a whole faction of what should I say, faction, like a category of people out there today that are doing that work, that are objective, very nonpartisan, that the way the field is today, it's near impossible to find traction with that. And I think even with like TLAB, for example, myself, the Last American Vagabond, we've grown our following, a very dedicated following over the years. And I'm even myself, it's always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back, over and over and over. So we have to work 3 times as hard to get there. And so we want to rise up some of these people that are doing amazing work, but it just falls through the cracks because there's no place for it in this kind of partisan madness. And so that's the idea of what that is. So the Independent Media Alliance is something we're going to be building a website out, I think, coming up soon. And it's all about that exact point. But I recommend everybody out there do their best to try to overlap with people. I argue even more so that you might not completely agree with, but that you respect the way they come to their conclusions. That's a big part for me. Is I enjoy disagreement and conversing about it as long as we're amicable. And I don't think you're trying to come at it from a dishonest place, And I think we need more of that today.
Yeah, I agree. That's pretty much. Whenever I'm in New York, I always get together with my friends. We have, long conversations that last 3 to 5 hours at the table. I mean, there's not much we agree upon, but we have a great time speaking with each other. I mean, I'm the only anarchist in the group. It's I think a little more than half the group are sympathetic to Trump. A few never Trumpers and a few that don't like him, who were open-minded, when he first got president. So they're diverse opinions. Everyone has a great time, whenever we get together, which is every time I'm in New York, and we have a very, very civil conversation, and sometimes my friends will write me, Jeff, you haven't been to New York for a while, come, because we missed the lunch. I said, well, you can always have the lunch without me. I don't need to be there. It's a group of people. And they said, no, but it's more fun when you're here. So hopefully you come to New York soon. And sometimes I've made trips to New York just to have one of those lunches. And then, of course, I always can find enough other things to do there. I'm a big fan. I don't know if Whitney Webb has a channel on BitChute. If you have a relationship with her, if you feel comfortable asking her if she would create a BitChute channel, I'm a big fan of her work.
I thought she did. Well, she's one of the writers and kind of with TLAB and the background team in general. She also runs Unlimited Hangout, her own platform. But I mean, I could throw it out to her. But she's one of the, as I said, one of the people that started the IMA. I thought she did though, but I'll find out and I'll reach out to her.
Yeah, I would also love to have her as a guest. I'm really a big fan. I read her content on Hangouts. That's it. Hangouts, is that?
Unlimited Hangout is that's her own platform.
Yeah. I like her stuff very much.
She does amazing work. One of the most, her ability to hold and digest like incredible amounts of information around, like how these things string together. It's like you read her books, you listen to her talk about it. It's like, you better write these things down because, you find yourself hearing it, understanding it, but then you get 3 sentences away and you're like, what was that again? Like, there's just so much information in one sitting. She does an amazing job.
So what are the things, given, given that we're beginning to have, so we're entering a new year with a new president, what are the things that you're most hopeful about for 2025?
Well, I mean, it's a mixed bag, because I think I see more people seeing through general ideas, the two-party illusion, for example, or, like people are quite like, I think COVID-19 and that dynamic, the illusion therein was a large part of why people are just generally willing to push back on classical held beliefs that we haven't seen before. Again, just like the concept of vaccines, right? That was such a you shall not pass kind of area in most people's minds before that time frame, and now I think it's kind of cracked open a bit. And so, same thing into this conversation, the foreign policy elements. I'm seeing more and more people ask these questions. So I am very hopeful that there is a change happening. The reason I'm hesitant is only because at the same time, I see a lot more bad things developing. And I think that is honestly a reaction to this. Now, I think we can recognize that these agendas have been well laid out for a long time. The digital ID element, the CBDC, the general technocratic direction has been laid out and driven toward for quite a long time. And so that's to say that it's not a new idea, but I think that the fact that it's so rapidly developing, even during COVID-19, I think we all sensed there was something that was, why was this being so clumsily forced in? Why did it seem different than before? And I think the same thing right now, that it seems like there's this rapid push. Then usually there's more of a slow drip level of propaganda. And so I really do think, and this you could argue, maybe you're right, it's more wishful thinking, but I think that but I argue there's more evidence to back this up than most things we've seen in the past, that people are standing up and asking questions. They're not buying it. Even in the partisan field, there's a lot of team sport politics happening, but I think most people, even within the partisanship, are just uncomfortable about what they saw from the election, uncomfortable with the people currently packing his administration, or what they saw with Kamala and Biden on the other side. Like, people are just kind of waking up from this illusion. And I think it's being so rapidly rushed in because they realize that there's not much time before people kind of push back, I guess. Now, again, it's really abstract. I could definitely be wrong, but I hope I'm not, because otherwise I think my opinion is that we're going in a very dark direction. But I feel a level of hope to that we're going to see something shift to where even the partisan elements are going to start to push back on these agendas. And my hope from there, quite honestly, is that we can find some way to roll this into at least a place where we start to have a conversation about a world without something like this. Not who else can rule, right? That's where this always goes. Well, here's a better ruler that will make this better for us. That we think and ask, at least have a conversation about what a world could be like without some centralized control structure. And I think the point that quickly people fall into is that, oh, well, who's going to control everything? And the problem is that we have this idea that government is somehow controlling everything. It isn't. There's elements they do make themselves control, but like the classic idea, who's going to build the roads is always a joke we talk about. The same people that do now. The same people that do, same groups. They're just individuals like you and I. Even the armed forces, the police, the military. These are still people. All you're lacking then is the centralized, overarching hand telling. So people will still find themselves in positions to be able to build homes and build roads. It'll just be less centralized. Now, there's all sorts of problems that develop within that, but I'll leave it there because it's there's so many questions in people's minds. All I want is people to be able to have that conversation. There is a world where we can exist without having government and rule by force, and I hope we can ask that question.
Yeah, and somebody who would at least be open to listening to an answer.
Yes.
The problem is right now people think of it as such an absurd concept that they don't even want to listen to the alternative. They don't want to treat anyone who says there is an alternative as being a reasonable person, because they've already accepted the fact is that government is a necessary evil. And that our lives would be so much worse off if this necessary evil didn't exist. They don't open their mind up to the possibility that there are alternatives, and so they would rather just reject anyone who thinks that there is an alternative as being outside the mainstream, a lunatic, a nut,
right,
as somebody that needs to be marginalized and demonized and dehumanized and delegitimized. So that's an unfortunate thing. I read an article today in one publication about a new book written by the Palantir CEO.
Hmm.
Um, Alex Karp is his name, and it's called The Technological Republic, and he says that Silicon Valley has lost its way. Big tech needs to realign with the U.S. government
Hmm.
to address pressing issues like AI. So
It's
he believes
technocracy.
he believes the future is, he says, instead of spending a time on inconsequential things like social media, that it basically should collaborate with the US government on quote game-changing advancements.
Right.
That sounds like a very centralized world where
Yes.
you get the wealthiest, the best and brightest in technology partnering with the government, figuring out how they should organize and design a society that, according to their criteria, is best for us, and that they would use a technology that they control. I pre-ordered the book because I'm interested in reading the details of what's in it.
Mhm.
But I saw in looking at the book that I'm going to go to Amazon right now, and it's because I saw that it had a lot of laudatory uh, comments to it, and uh, um, it's just the technology republic here. So here it's got well, of course, Walter Isaacson says fascinating and important. Uh, they have other quote public intellectuals like Neil Ferguson, James Mattis,
Of course.
Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon, in today's complicated geopolitical, technological, and economic environment, the author's ability to be both well-spoken and outspoken in the technological republic can help us understand important issues about the future prosperity of the U.S. and its allies. This book is by turns provocative and insightful, and Alex Karp's resilience, patriotism, and depth of experience in our rapidly changing world provide instructive lessons and intellectual arguments for all of us to consider. So supposedly our patriotism is expressed not through us achieving, great things as an individual, but us working to collaborate with government. That
Of
makes us
course.
patriotic. I don't think that was the George Washington, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson definition of patriotism.
Yeah.
They were not nationalists, and they made it pretty clear that they should. So here you have, David Ignatius from the Washington Post, some guy from NATO, Neil Ferguson, and again, James Madison, all saying this is great. Yeah, it's all great that we take, this great relationship where we build all this tech in the private sector that's supported by the public sector, and the public sector will use this tech to design a world, beyond our capacity as individuals through free enterprise, free commerce, economic freedom, political freedom, and liberty that we could create making these choices on our own. So
Yeah.
how do we battle back against, this? Because again, this is somebody influential in the current administration who's
Right.
perceived as an anti-establishment administration.
Yeah.
So they're buying into this. So this administration is not going to be the savior for these issues.
Right. And it's flat out not an anti-establishment administration. It is more tapped into the establishment than I've ever seen in an administration. But what's interesting is, that you have this Alex Karp, who was just in an interview more than once, by the way. I think it was actually 3 interviews over the span of a few days, where he was stressing the idea that the only way we can have peace is if everybody else is scared. He was really adamant about this, and not even just explicitly people that want to hurt you, but this person that we perceive as an enemy and their friends and their family and their mistresses. He made this whole point about it. And it's like that is a very, that is, as somebody put it perfectly, imperial hubris is what that is. Right. And so what's crazy is that this is a person who's now talking about, what he's describing is what we would call technocracy, right? These technocratic elitists who believe, and what I'm sure you're familiar, but for your audience, the point being is that we're talking about a classic idea, which, by the way, Elon Musk's father was a central part in Technocratic Inc., is about the idea of essentially leaders in the fields of science and different, tech industry leaders, as opposed to politicians who are leading the charge. Now, in a way, that does seem to make sense. Like, I'd be the first to say I'm tired of politicians who don't have like technical knowledge pretending to know they know what's going on. But the problem is that it's not coming from a place, and maybe it once was, I don't think so, but now it's not coming from a place, I think, of benefiting you through but more knowledge, but more so about, as my writer for TLAB as well, Matt Arrett, has talked about in the past, what he argues would be like the true rulership of our country, of our world, even now beginning to step back out into the light. Now, even if you disagree with that, it's obvious that we're seeing this sort of technocratic takeover, I would call it. I mean, we've seen these kind of trial balloons of things like the so-called libertarian city of Prosperos in Honduras, which is not. It's a nightmare technocratic city that's not even remotely libertarian, and ultimately arguing that that's somehow the future, like these freedom cities, what they've compared to that, and like even within the administration itself, showing all these technocratic elements being appointed, which are having seemingly far more influence on the outcome than many other elements we've seen in the past. And to me, that's a very alarming thing. And then now back to the point of the book, stressing the idea of the fascistic intertwining of these companies with the government itself. I mean, that's just terrifying. I mean, that's exactly what, in any other context, the very group that are supporting this, the Republicans, would have been calling out. Now, maybe not historically in the context of what republicanism is, but recently, COVID-19. That was what they were, we were all charged up about what they were building. But now, because they give it the Elon Trump, teal slant, it's suddenly the good guy version of all the things they thought they were fighting. And it's just, scares me that people could fall for that, but I'm hoping that is not all of them, but yeah, that's where I see that going, is technocracy.
Yes. It's, and basically, I don't know what movie I saw, a number of years ago, and the movie basically had, these like, very depressed, vampires. And, so they were hanging out together. They were very depressed. They were not vampires that actually went and took blood out of people. They had suppliers from blood banks, so that basically when people donated blood, I guess they were through like a black market for blood donations. They were able to keep themselves alive by going to these blood banks to get blood. So they weren't going and killing people and sucking their blood. So they were very civilized. And so they're sitting around talking, and they're saying, gee, it's kind of like a pain in the ass going and getting this blood. Why do we even want to live any longer? I mean, we've seen such a wonderful world, but now, and they called humans zombies. So, and we have to think about a zombie. What's a zombie? A zombie basically is something that just acts completely on instincts, not through any thought, and you push them in direction, and they will go into that direction until they hit a wall. And then if they hit a wall, the wall will cause them to move into another direction, which they'll keep going until they bump into another object, which will keep having them going around, kind of like Brownian motion. So like random movements. And and as I watched the movie, I told my wife, I said, I think this is the best description I've seen of people today. That they're basically zombies. You push them in direction, they go ahead, keep going in that direction. They won't change direction until they bump into an object where there's enough pain from bumping into that action that they'll just then choose a different direction. But they're not going to choose a different direction through any sort of comprehensive due diligence and thought. They're just going to randomly choose the next direction. They're going to stay on that path until they have another obstacle that's going to force them to then choose another path, which that path will also evolve on a sort of random nature. So
I'd like to believe that more people are beginning to see than that. You know what I mean? Like, that's more of my hopeful mindset in that. But sadly, I do agree that's a large portion of the population. But it's I always kind of, even if it's, again, wishful thinking, I think it's a positive direction to do that in. But I see little highlights of it. Like, again, during COVID-19, there were clear examples to me that did demonstrate that this was nonpartisan and that more people were seeing at least the general point than not. And I think we've now seen that looking back. And I still think those are hopeful moments. And I do think that we see kind of ebbs and flows with that, all of a sudden, the drones, or some people get kind of lurch into something and they lose a little bit more of the awareness, but I think that I have more of a positive look on that. I think that more people are starting to, like, as I was saying before, starting to see it, which is why we're seeing this kind of crazy reaction, but I could definitely be wrong.
No, this has been a really enjoyable conversation, Ryan. I always like to conclude these conversations with my guests being able to say things I did not allow them to say during this conversation. So what are the things that you would like to tell everyone that I haven't given you a chance to help, or maybe question you would have liked that I would have asked that didn't ask, so you'd give it, so you'd have an opportunity to talk about what you want to talk about, unimpeded by me. So go ahead, Ryan.
I thought we had a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking with Jeffrey, and I think that I'll just end with what I'm happy to see what BitChute is doing, and I'm really positive. I feel positive about the fact that the same point you were making before, that there is a platform out there that is, to its own detriment, taking a stand for what they believe in, and I think it just resonates with me as a person, which my audience will know, that this is what we need to be doing. I was very adamant during the election cycle, the selection dynamic, to say that, this is a time where we need to really lean into our principles, that we shouldn't be playing this game where we act like it's, lesser of evils and we should compromise because that's what adults do. And, it's like all these narratives we were getting. And I think it's more of a time than ever that we need to err on the side of what we truly believe are, our integrity, our principles. And I think that's what BitChute is showing right now, is that that's important, and that it's something that you should stand with, but that you're going to succeed regardless of the detriment that they're putting in front of you. And I think that's powerful. That's what I'm trying to show with what I'm doing, and do it the right way. So I'm just proud to be part of that as ambassador and helping to support this platform, and hopefully grow into something that can challenge the rest of them, in a way that does have actual free speech, which is what we should all be fighting for. So thanks for having me on, Jeffrey. I enjoyed talking with you, man.
And one other question: where can people find you? Where can people find your content? People that want to know more about you, how could they find your contact, communicate with you, whatever? So what's the way people can learn more about Ryan and get more exposed to Ryan?
Just the LastAmericanVagabond.com is the website. As I always say when this is asked, is we're on, I don't know what, 15 different platforms, which I recommend you look into ways to support the platforms like this that are doing good work, or reach out through those platforms to us. But don't ever let any platform be the conduit between you and our information. So if you want to find out what T-Lab is talking about, what our shows are saying, what different writers are saying, go right to the LastAmericanVagabond.com and look at the information there, share it from there, watch our videos through, for example, the BitChute embed that it's on our pages. I think that's important to support the independent media out there at their base. Because a lot of times, like for example, YouTube and others take a huge cut of what's coming through their platform and so on, and interject different things and things we're looking at, and so that it's important to go right to the source. So that's the LastAmericanVagabond.com.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. This was a very, very enjoyable, very pleasant, and I hope a lot of people go check out the LastAmericanVagabond.com.
Thank you, brother.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.